You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 23rd of May 2024 on Monocle Radio.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing, coming to you live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Georgina Godwin. Coming up on today's programme,
PRC's dispatch of aircraft and vessels harassing its neighbours in recent years has threatened global peace and stability. Their military exercise is not helping with the situation around Taiwan Strait.
Taiwan has a new leader and China is making its displeasure at what Beijing calls his separatist views known by conducting military drills around the self-ruled island. We'll have more on that. We'll also get the latest business news and then to South Korea, which has unveiled a record $19 billion package to support the chip industry. We'll get those details. We'll learn about Lisbon Design Week, plus Fernando heads to the Southern Hemisphere for the global countdown.
Yes, indeed, Georgina. Today we're going to learn more about the sounds of Tanzania.
Thank you, Fernando. All that right here on The Briefing with me, Georgina Godwin. As we know, China's ruling Communist Party says Taiwan is part of its territory, despite never having controlled it, and it's vowed to take back the island by force if necessary. Taiwan has just sworn in a new leader who's called on Beijing to cease its intimidation tactics. In response, China's launched 2 days of large-scale military drills surrounding Taiwan. Well, joining me is Isabel Hilton, who's founder of China Dialogue. Isabel, many thanks for joining us once again on the programme. Are these drills directly related to the new Taiwanese leader, and what can you tell us about him and his attitude to Beijing?
Hello, Georgina. Always a pleasure to be with you. Yes, they're directly related in the sense that China was displeased that the Taiwanese people once again elected or chose the DPP as their ruling party. The DPP is a native Taiwanese party. It's always had a position that Taiwan is a self-governing and independent polity. So it's not that it's new that he should that William Lai should make these points in his inaugural address. They did not like his predecessor either, also from the DPP. So, and there was a rather alarming statement around the time of the election, which is now some weeks ago, that if there were another DPP victory, that it would eventually lead to war, because essentially the positions are incompatible. You know, if Beijing really has a deadline for what it would call the recovery of Taiwan, and the people of Taiwan elect a party that would not contemplate a unification with China, these are incompatible positions. So that's why we're seeing this kind of rattling of sabres. Now, China was relatively muted around the time of the election, but it was quite evident that they would do something to express their displeasure around the inauguration, and that's what we're seeing.
How important is this first real test for the newly elected William Lai? I mean, will it set the tone for how he manages relations with China?
Yes, and his speech, although, you know, he did make the point about Taiwan independence, but he also called for peace and for, you know, kind of a lowering of tensions. So he's not setting out to provoke, nor is he conceding his position, and that you know, that is very much what you would expect of someone who is, you know, elected to maintain the notion of Taiwan independence. And I think we will see more of this. You know, we've seen a steady escalation in scale and frequency of these exercises. And for China, they test out Taiwan's defenses. They wear down, you know, you have to scramble aircraft every time there's either a rocket attack or indeed a, you know, intrusion into airspace. We've had some quite nasty confrontations around closer to Kinmen Island, which is part of the Taiwanese archipelago, but very close to the coast of the mainland. And we've had some really quite nasty confrontations between Coast Guard vessels and mainland Chinese vessels. And the problem with these exercises is that there's always a risk of an accident. And we don't really have measures in place to, calm things down if there were to be an accident.
And I wonder if China's crossed the median line. I mean, that used to be something, although it doesn't recognise it, it did respect. And if it has crossed that line, how important is it?
That is part of the escalation. In fact, we've seen more and more, intrusions of that nature really since the Pelosi affair, and it is stepping up. And this is partly a rehearsal, but it's not really a rehearsal because in any serious attack on Taiwan, we would anticipate that they would try to take out both the Air Force and the Navy with rocket attacks. And they have, hundreds of rockets trained on Taiwan from the mainland. So, what we're seeing is a kind of intimidation, but it's not really a rehearsal. There is no live fire, fortunately. But yes, there are so many options. This is a very important waterway for global trade, for example. The Taiwan Straits, which China has now declared an internal waterway, which in theory gives it, the legal right to close it, that would have a devastating effect on global trade. That would escalate matters to a serious international level. But I think also, China's been learning the limitations of Western responses from Ukraine, where you have seen huge, in theory, sanctions against Russia, which have had almost no effect because Russia has been able to divert its trade, its import and its exports to China. And, unless you get into a serious confrontation in which Chinese banks, for example, are locked out of global systems, and that's the sort of nuclear bomb in the financial systems. But short of that, I think China thinks it has a lot of leeway for this kind of escalation of grey zone warfare, which creates new facts. It creates new facts on the ground, and it has this intimidatory effect for the Taiwanese population.
So Taiwan can really perhaps give up the hope that there will be some kind of international rescue, despite its pact with the US. I mean, do you think then that there is a lesser chance of this sparking a major international incident, given the West's attitude towards China and the fact that really they won't want to take enormously punitive measures?
I think that the difficulty that the West is facing is that China has got very good at this kind of grey zone warfare. So blockading Taiwan, so cutting the data cables, doing things that it would be difficult, particularly in the current mood in the United States, to persuade the United States to come to to engage in military response. So as long as these actions are sub-military, as they have been, for example, in the South China Sea, it creates a real dilemma for Taiwan supporters. And Taiwan supporters are real. They include not just the United States, but Japan, South Korea. A lot of China's neighbors are very concerned about the Taiwan situation. But this game of measures which don't justify warfare quite, it's very difficult. And I haven't really seen a very convincing set of responses as yet from as I say, from Taiwan's supporters.
What about Taiwan itself? What's its military response been to these drills?
Well, it's pretty conventional. So when a plane strays into Taiwan's airspace, they scramble their fighter jets. They have very sophisticated air force and a pretty good navy. The problem is that those would be the first targets in any real attack. So where Taiwan is criticized from a strategic perspective is that they haven't really mobilized the population as a defense force, as we see in, for example, in Finland, or countries that feel Russia breathing down their necks and imagine having to fight a war over the kind that Ukraine is having to fight. Taiwan has only had 1 month of military service traditionally for its population. It's begun to increase that, but there is a sense that if the major expensive assets were knocked out, as they could be quite quickly, what would the result be then? How would Taiwan resist? And a sense that, Taiwan hasn't put up a very convincing show, although they would wish to resist. What would they be resisting with?
Isabel, thank you very much indeed. That was Isabel Hilton. Now, here's Carlotta Rebello with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Georgina. Norway says it will bar almost all Russian tourists from entering the country in response to the Kremlin's ongoing war in Ukraine. Exceptions will be granted in some cases, for example, visits to close family residing in Norway and for Russian citizens who work or study in Norway or other Schengen countries. General Mahamat Idris Deby Itno, who has led Chad's military regime for the last 3 years, will be sworn in on Thursday after a controversial election victory in the Central African nation. The swearing-in marks the end of 3 years of military rule in a country crucial for the fight against insurgency across Africa's restive Sahel region. And military authorities in South Korea are analysing nerve agent powder found at Incheon International Airport. According to the airport's police, unidentified black powder was discovered in the carry-on bag of a passenger in her 20s. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Georgina.
Thank you, Carlotta. And now to the latest business news with the head of investment at Interactive Investor, Victoria Scholar. Victoria, good afternoon to you. Now, we know that Rishi Sunak has called a snap election here in the UK. Tell us about the UK economy data out today.
Yeah, so we had some data out this morning, which doesn't really bode well for the Prime Minister. The UK Composite Purchasing Managers Index fell short of expectations. It gives clues into how the economy is faring. The services sector flash PMI reading for May was also sharply below expectations, and the services sector is really the key growth engine of the UK economy. This fell to the lowest level in 6 months, so it doesn't exactly paint a fantastic picture for the outlook for the UK economy in the coming months. The manufacturing reading was a bit better than expected at top forecasts, but it's much less significant in terms of the overall health of the economy. And as we know, the UK tipped into a short, shallow recession at the end of last year, but it did quickly emerge with strong growth in the first quarter of this year. But that figure is expected to slow around the second quarter. And there are hopes that the economy will pick up in the latter stages of this year when inflation continues to come down and interest rates finally get cuts.
Now, some very good news for one giant artificial intelligence company. Give us the details of that.
Yes, that's right. So we heard from NVIDIA. It reported a 262% surge in quarterly revenue thanks to record AI chip demand, and the company struck a very upbeat tone for continued growth to come. NVIDIA has really become the AI stock market darling, the poster child for artificial intelligence, since its data center graphics processing units are instrumental in terms of the growth of AI, and its data center revenue surged by over 400%, and its earnings per share were up more than 600%. And that's why we saw the stock jump after hours following the results. And this extends a recent rally because shares are up by more than 90% since the start of the year. And it's helped broader US stock markets to hit record highs just this month.
Well, AI, of course, is also enjoying huge success in other parts of the world. Now, one would expect Taiwan's stock market to fall given all the troubles surrounding the island. But in fact, it's surged ahead of South Korea. And this is to do with AI.
Yes, that's right. It's thanks to the success of Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing, or TSMC, which is up nearly 50% so far this year. The chipmaker has been benefiting as well from the boom in AI, and that contrasts with South Korea's biggest company, Samsung Electronics, which has fallen about 2.5% this year because it hasn't been able to supply its chips to NVIDIA, which controls 90% of the AI chip market. So since COVID, we've seen that Taiwan and South Korea's markets have been fluctuating in value, but Taiwan has been on top since December. So the Kospi is only up about 2% so far this year versus the Taiwan index, which is up over 20% this year.
And finally, some news on chocolate.
Yes, that's right. So not necessarily good news for the Oreo maker Mondelez, because it's been fined €337.5 million for illegally limiting cross-border sales across the EU. The EU's competition chief, Margrethe Vestager, has said that Mondelez did so to maintain high prices for its products at the detriment of its consumers. And the European Commission has found that Mondelez restricted cross-border trade on purpose and that it abused its dominant position in some national markets.
Victoria, thank you very much indeed. You're back with the briefing on Monocle Radio. Now, we've just heard about the fluctuating chip market in South Korea, but the country's just unveiled a record $19 billion package to support the local semiconductor industry. Well, John Lee is editor of Korea Pro in Seoul, and he joins me on the line from the South Korean capital now. John, thanks for coming on the briefing. What are the details of this new package announced by the government?
Well, this is quite a large budget, a significant size up from the previous one. Now, among the money that's being spent for this, about $12.4 billion will be used for loan programs. Now, these loan programs will be aimed primarily at small and medium-sized enterprises. What the South Korean government said that they want to make this a comprehensive thing. So it's not just for the big players like Samsung or SK Hynix. They also want to help to develop the small businesses that the large corporations will inevitably depend on, so that there will be a lot more localization as opposed to having to rely on foreign imports.
I thought the language used around this was interesting. President Yoon Suk-yeol said, as you all know, semiconductors are a field of national all-out war. I wonder if you could unpack that statement for us.
Well, this is not the first time that Yoon has called this a tech war. He's used this phrase several times. And from South Korea's perspective, it very much is almost like a tech war. South Korea is an export-dependent economy, and the economy would not be anywhere near where it is without semiconductor exports. From 2022 to 2023, the South Korean economy had deficits, and its exports suffered tremendously because of what was at the time a global chip lack of demand. But starting from this year, in the first quarter, there was a huge demand in the chips. But the reason why South Korea is calling it a war is because over the past 5 years, even though chips is such an important part of the South Korean economy, South Korea's global market share has been shrinking. And a lot of it is because of increasing competition from the US, Japan, and China, as well as the Netherlands. And so South Korea is desperately trying to maintain its leadership position in this industry.
What about Taiwan, who also is a big semiconductor manufacturer? Is the tension and uncertainty around the island a factor in this?
No, not at all. Yes, there is more than a 0% chance that there could be a war between China and there could be a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. Let's put it that way. But that would cost way too much money to a lot of vested interests. And so the way that South Korea is operating is that it is assuming that the status quo will remain in place for the time being. And TSMC has been a thorn in the side of a lot of South Korean corporations. TSMC has been producing a lot of chips that have been in high demand in much of the world. And so I mentioned earlier that from 2022 to 2023, South Korea's economy shrunk because of its dwindling chip demand. But that has not been the case with Taiwan. Taiwan's market share grew rapidly during that phase. And so South Korean companies have been very wary about TSMC for quite some time now.
John Lee, thank you very much indeed. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. Lisbon Design Week is underway, with events across the city bringing contemporary design and crafts into focus and taking over showrooms and galleries to celebrate the talents of the local creative community. Well, taking place alongside the ARCO Lisbon Art Fair, Lisbon by Design Fair and Lisbon Creative Week, the city is certainly busy. Monocle's May Lee Evans caught up with the event's founder, Michelle Feitman, to find out how this fledgling show, now in its second edition, has developed. To start, Michelle began by sharing how the fair first began.
A few years ago, in fact, when I just arrived from London to Lisbon, I saw a sticker on one of the shops saying Santos Design District. So I was very curious, and I found the founders of this initiative, which in fact was no longer active. So many people who started to tell me that design was not sufficiently recognized in this country, and particularly Lisbon. I saw so many talents that I had this idea that something has to happen to show to the world all the talents that are here and to try to activate the sector. Last year, I spoke to Julie from the fair Lisbon by Design, and we decided to have a try, so together, and ask some places, some venues, if they would agree to open during the design week. For me, it was very important to find a moment where we were sure that there would be a lot of people around. Arco dates were good because at least we could tap on this amount of people. What I noticed as a newcomer in Lisbon was that many showrooms, galleries, or even museums that were really interesting sometimes didn't have the right attendance. It was quite low in general. So I thought there must be something to do about it to try. So this is how the idea came. Last year we had 50 venues. This year we have 80. When you have so many venues, you have, of course, to select, and quite a diversity of things. We are very lucky that in Lisbon we have quite famous designers known internationally.
This is the second edition of Lisbon Design Week. I wondered how you are hoping to forge the personality. What is the tone that you want to have with this design week?
I lived many years in London, and I didn't try to reproduce what I have seen there. It's not easy. What we decided from the first day is first to recognize and acknowledge the special skills and artisans that they have here, to try to put the focus on what is produced here, whether by foreigners or by Portuguese. We don't want to exclude things that are coming from abroad, but the main focus is still what is made in Portugal, or the use of some Portuguese material. And I must say that many international showrooms, we don't have so many, but the ones that have been selected have all agreed to present, in addition to their own collection, to present either a designer or an artisan or some specific pieces made here. So I think this is strong and will stay there. I think the second element that I see appearing is that we are building, I believe, a community around design and craftsmanship. This is really apparent right now because we can see some collaborations that are going on already among the people that we put together in this community. Many of them realize that if they want to have this design sector, to bring it at a level which will be recognized internationally, they have to work together and try each to support it. This is, I think, something which might become a characteristic DNA of the community here.
What are some of the things you're very excited to see this year, or what we want to be championing going forward?
It's a small city, but with the traffic, it's difficult for people to reach one point and go to the other point. So what we have tried to do is that we have connected people from the same neighborhood and try to have them presenting something specific together. We have introduced in some part of the city some hubs. This is creating a real big sense of community. What I have noticed is that some of our participants are going to the next level. It's not only opening the showroom or the galleries and inviting an artist or a designer to show some new pieces. Now it goes at another level. Some of them are presenting immersive exhibitions, things that are much more creative. And they are putting a lot of efforts and also some investment into it. That means that they take it very seriously. And this is creating a kind of competition, and we see it at different levels. A strong field here that we want to develop is the graphic design. We can see already that some of these participants who are organizing evenings or special exhibition, they are trying to have amazing graphic design to announce their events. And we see that once one is issuing one, the other is trying to do better. So that's very exciting.
And that was Michelle Feitman speaking to our May Lee Evans. Michelle is founder of Lisbon Design Week. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. Well, that jazzy sound that got us chair dancing means only one thing. It's time for our senior correspondent, Fernando Augusto Pacheco, to join me once again for his weekly global countdown. Fernando, where are we heading?
We are heading to Tanzania, and I'm very excited, Georgina, because I genuinely think they have such a vibrant music scene. And it doesn't only stay in Tanzania. Even when I went to Kenya a few years ago, they were only listening to Tanzanian music. I mean, it's a big industry there, and I think you can enjoy this top 5.
Well, tell me, what's at number 5?
At number 5, we have the musician from Tanzania, Harmonize, featuring Mario. The song is called Disconnect. Let's have a listen.
Mungu Baba nitoe kwenye kundi la wafu, wananichukia baridi barafu, nguo zao safi, moyoni wachafu, na kama unabaki megi stay far away. Una komenti utumbo na hujala we.
That was Harmonize there.
I love that.
I love that as well. And Harmonize, there is a sound for Tanzania. It's called bongo flava. It's kind of the mixture of genres, but it's known as kind of Tanzanian music. But he mixes that specific music with Nigerian Afrobeat and some Amapiano as well from South Africa. So he is a man full of music genres there as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, this next one, number 4, is called Mariu, I think.
Mariu, that's a good 2 O's, of course. I think artists like to add some add letters to their names, right?
So tell us about this track.
I mean, the name we might know. I mean, if you don't know Swahili, Hakuna Matata, perhaps might be. Yeah. You know, there are no troubles, right? And this song, there are no troubles indeed. It's a love song. It's a positive track. I love the lush beats of this track. Shall we have a listen?
Absolutely.
And I know.
I love this track, Hakuna Matata, and the video is very pretty. It's like they're having a wedding and then the woman is pregnant as well. It's a song about joy. And I have to say, Mario, he's a businessman as well. He's got his own multimedia production company. He's everywhere in Tanzania.
I mean, it's such a vibrant country, isn't it? It's a place that's doing really extremely well right now.
I need to go to Tanzania. It's definitely on my list. You've been, right, Georgina?
I have, yeah. I've been in Dar es Salaam, but I've also been on the island of Zanzibar. And shall I tell you why I went there?
Please.
To find the birthplace of Freddie Mercury.
Yes.
And there are at least 3 places that claim that he was born in their little house in Stone Town. And they're all making loads of money out of it. So good for them. Who knows where he was really born? But I would recommend Zanzibar. I went there to escape Christmas because it's a Muslim country. And I thought, if we go to Zanzibar, there will be no Christmas carols. There'll be none of that. We stayed in a hotel which A, was dry, no alcohol, and B, had a motion-activated Christmas tree right outside our room. Every time we walked past, we wish you a Merry Christmas. It was a disaster, but I love the island.
Let's go back together, Gigi. Number 3, I think you're going to like this. The description of the song before we listen is a song for the lovers and the ones who can't keep their hands off each other. Let's have a listen. And number 3, it's Barnaba featuring Yami with Nibusu, which means kiss me in Swahili.
Na nikikosa ile kitu ndo kabisa silali penzi nusu kaputi nusu mgonjwa najifia baby na sindano yako ndo yanitosha kuntibu ya
kama mendeni kuchali penzi kalikata na kisu kikali mtoto upepo wa bahari anitulizaga najikuta gambari.
And Yami, I was reading about her. She one of her music inspirations is Indian music. So there is a little bit
you can hear that,
you can hear that the way, and she loves cooking and painting as well. That's her hobbies.
Let's talk about Diamond at number 2.
I mean, Diamond is huge in Tanzania. Basically, he's got over 70 million followers on Instagram. So clearly he's kind of a global figure, one of the most important African musicians, a big guy. And so we're going to hear, and this song he's actually singing with his girlfriend, Zuku or Zuchu. And if you read the Tanzanian gossip websites, I mean, there are all sorts of gossips about them. Are they breaking up? Are they back together? I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of fake news in there, but this song is all about their love towards each other. The song is called Raha, which I believe means pleasure. Let's have a listen. There might be a little bit jealousy among them from my, extensive reading of their relationship.
I'm sort of getting that little Indian vibe in there again, actually, with that.
Yeah, I think they're very open kind of to the sounds of the world.
And Tanzania had a huge Indian population, of course, at one point. Yeah.
Here you go. I mean, makes sense now.
So, who is number one in Tanzania?
Guess who's back? It's Diamond Platnumz, but this time with Khalil Harrison and Chley. The song's called Comment ça va, which is like how are you in French, but I think the song's about greetings from all around the world. They even speak Portuguese at some point. They say como vai, ni hao, among many others. How are yous? Let's have a listen.
Comment ça va? Comment ça va? Aya 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 ça va? Comment ça va? Unyaka savana chiga bonu ya tetela wente shot nyamtata asa ay manu yesa kuna nangat namshange patapat.
I love that house beat kind of from the piano. I think that's such an exciting sound as well. And Diamond Platnumz, I mean, even with the name, he's an ambitious guy. He starts selling clothes, and with the money he got from that, then he launched his own music career.
Well, we've got our playlist sorted when we go to Tanzania together, I think.
Exactly, and it's not going to be a disaster, Georgina.
No, it won't. It'll be fabulous. I'm looking forward to it. Also, I've seen you on Instagram in your little swimming trunks.
Perfect for the beaches of Zanzibar.
Fernando Augusto Pacheco, thank you very much indeed. And that's all for this edition of The Briefing, which was produced by Tom Webb. Our researcher was George Ruskin, and our studio manager was Tamsin Howard. And The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Georgina Godwin. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.